I'm Haley, nice to meet you all. I run our product and platform divisions at Codesmith. So not on admissions team or operations team, I don't teach as well. I'm kind of separate, so exciting to meet you all tonight. I actually don't interact with students too much, but I've been at Codesmith for about almost 4.5 years now. So been here for quite some time, kind of done a lot of different roles, been involved in admissions at some points and programs for sure. Now I kind of sit in between all of our other teams as well as our engineering team. And what my main focus on is our website, our online learning platform, CSX, and internal tools and things like that. So happy to talk about Codesmith Engineering as an engineering perspective as a company. Probably not super interesting to any of you, but if that comes up, definitely feel free to ask me about that. We had to put a fun fact on here. I'm not sure if this is a weird thing to say, but here we are. So for a while, I studied spiders in Costa Rica. I come from a harder science background, or neuroscience was kind of my main area. If anyone else is coming from sciences, lots of people from sciences into tech. But I now consider myself very good friends with spiders. Does anyone else consider themselves friends with spiders? I don't see anyone. Okay, that's okay. They're less, known for their friendship, but just kind of a little bit about me. And there's my email as well. I will send it into the chat, like I said before. Feel free to email me about anything. I also usually send out a summary email tomorrow. So if you don't get a chance to write this down, don't worry. I believe you all had to sign into this event. So I will send you an email tomorrow. Okay, let's get started. Kind of already covered this a little bit, but what we'll cover today, overview of the programs, curriculum, career services, and outcomes, one of my absolute favorite parts of the program. Impact of COVID-19, I'm sure you're all wondering how things have adapted, kind of what's our long-term schedule, things like that. Admissions, financial aid, and how to prepare for admissions, which includes a lot of our free resources and our 2 prep programs as well. Okie dokie. What is Codesmith? So when I talk about Codesmith, I really like to mention a lot more than just our programs. We do tons of free workshops every week, usually around 6 to 7 free workshops every week. All of those are online right now, so anyone can come to that, but those are usually out of our LA and New York offices. We also host larger meetup groups called SoCal React and React and Node. We do panels or lightning round talks or sessions like that. So really just focused on being a hub for technology. We have a lot of organizational partnerships for scholarships or just general things happening in the tech atmosphere. So while we do have our core programs, which is most of what I'm going to focus on today, there's also a lot that we do in the broader communities, really central to our mission of getting everyone involved in software engineering. Anyone can learn to code, whether or not that means you're coming through our programs or just interacting with us from, a 1.5-hour workshop one time, or, coming to a speaker event that we have, or passing along a partner organization or something like that. There's lots of other ways to be involved and be active in this community, really just focused on broadening what it looks like to be a software engineer, who's allowed to be a software engineer. And a lot of that comes into kind of our mission, but goes into areas that aren't just those core programs. But the core programs that we do offer that I'm going to spend most of the time on is this 12-week full-time residency, usually out of LA and New York, currently both remote, as well as our 38-week part-time remote software engineering immersive program. So we will touch base on pretty much all logistics on both of those. But as I said before, if I don't cover something that you're curious about, definitely ask me a question about that towards the end. So why an immersive program? Lots of reasons. I think having worked with a lot of students over the last 4 years, I pretty much heard every reason you could be looking into a coding bootcamp or a program similar to ours. A lot of people also think about it as what is the difference between a coding program or immersive program and a 4-year computer science degree? Definitely depends on the program that you're looking at. In terms of Codesmith, we do have quite a few students that come from computer science degrees or come from engineering positions already. That could also mean that, so that's kind of an interesting thing. Are there people coming from engineering backgrounds or people that are coming from non-technical backgrounds? Totally both. I would say the focus that we have is it's obviously a lot more expedited. It is, 3 months or around 8.5 months versus 4 years. You can kind of compare that college tuition price tag or living and expenses to that as well. I would also just say it's a lot more focused on what is currently happening in the technology world. We are so invested in what technologies are companies using? What are we seeing most often on job postings? What are our industry partners working with? And like technology changes pretty quickly. React is one of the most popular technologies right now that a lot of our grads end up working in. That was not the case 5 years ago. So it's nicer as a smaller institution that we're able to be more, just keep up with that a lot more. We're a lot less, focused in these like long-term programs. We're able to kind of make changes really fast. We're able to add modules. We're able to kind of adapt to that tech atmosphere that is also adapting. It also means that it's kind of like vocational in that way, where we are paying attention to what the job market is looking for and able to train people specifically in those types of technologies that they're able to kind of go in and be best prepared for the jobs that we are being seen as, most popular or most up and coming, or like where the biggest need is as well. In-depth learning and tight-knit community. College is awesome. I'm sure everyone who went to college in this room made a lot of friends there. I will say, though, it does not compare to spending about 100 hours a week with a group of 30 people. That is intense. That is immersive. That is a lot. So that is like a very certain type of immersion where like, you're really only doing Codesmith. You are only focusing on your lectures, on the modules that you're doing, building the projects, attending workshops, things like that. Pretty much for 3 months. The part-time program is a little bit different, but it's not as immersive in that sense. But it does have kind of that really tight-knit community. You go through something for a long time with each other, 4 days a week, for quite a few hours as well. I'll talk about that more specifically, but that really is like an amazing place to, you are building your network. You're finding these people that you're going to be, coworkers with, or potential founders with, are going to help you get referrals later in life. And that's coming from that like tight-knit community, and also that like, just you are spending tons and tons of hours with these people every week. You're having good times, you're having hard times, you're doing all of it. Project and portfolio development. That is also something that's really unique about Codesmith specifically, is the emphasis on projects. You are in the program for a certain amount of time. Definitely the vast majority of that time is spent building projects versus doing like modules or units. Obviously, all of those projects are working with a lot of the technologies that you do learn in those modules and units. It's just really getting your hands dirty, and like really the main focus about like how to learn computer science or how to learn software development is working with the technology. There's only so much you can take from theory, or this is how this could work. You have to start working with it and building with it and breaking things and fixing them and seeing how things go. So that project emphasis is a little bit different than traditional education around computer science. I took quite a few computer science classes in college. Loved them, but it certainly wasn't project focused. There was a lot of time spent on like, why did this come to be the way that it is? I was mostly focused on Python, but similar to JavaScript. And so I think that is a clear thing that I've been able to see personally, the impact that it has on people's learning and ability to pick up these technologies. And career support. Career support is crucial. We work, and I will talk about this a lot more in depth later, but that's definitely one of the highlights of the program. I think like our dedicated hiring support team like is with you until you get that job, and then is back with you for that second job. All the things from lectures around your online profile, to specific resume review, to your personal narrative, to salary negotiations when you have that offer in hand, to like, hey, we're seeing that you are getting X amount of interviews, but you're falling off on this amount. That's a higher percentage than we'd expect. Like, let's do a mock interview and kind of see what's going on there. So it's very, very personalized, and it's very, very particular based on a certain person's goals, or what kind of position that they're looking for as well. I always do this where I go way more in depth on these very overview slides, and then I'm going to cover all of it later. So if that wasn't enough, I will get there, but also I'm going to try to move myself along so I don't continue to do that. Your support team. So these are amazing folks, all my coworkers, so I appreciate them so much. But this is really who you spend a majority of your time within the program besides your cohort mates, or the folks in the cohort either right above you or below you, because you do spend quite a bit of time with those as well, since we have 2 overlapping cohorts for each program at once. So kind of can call them like a senior junior situation. So obviously these folks are kind of broken up into alumni programs. Lead technical mentors means that they're giving lectures during the programs. And then each location has a lead as well. You also work a lot with our operations and community managers for things that are outside of lectures, kind of general day-to-day checks on well-being, mindfulness, things like that, as well as they're really involved in your admissions process and growth prior to starting the program. If you've been to any of our workshops, you've probably recognized these faces. If you've interacted with any of our admissions team members, same thing there. All of them are kind of public facing as well, so you might have met them before. If you have not, I definitely recommend setting up a time to either have an academic advisor call, come to one of our workshops, tune in, or start a conversation with an admissions team member over email. They're all really, really helpful and just love talking about Codesmith as well. So it can be great resources there. Community. This is a huge reason to come to Codesmith as well, and just like a really cool part of an immersive program that like is really important. If you're spending 100 hours a week with a group of people, you better hope that they have the same values and are like as invested as you are and like are wanting to build you up versus like tear you down. And so that's really what we pay a lot of attention to in the admissions process as well. It's not just about your JavaScript knowledge. It's about like, are you a team player? Are you, what do we call it? There's non-technical communication. You know, if you hit a block, are you yelling at your computer? Or are you solving through this slowly and patiently and working with your team to make sure that you're able to get through that? That's a huge deal. A lot of people don't think about that and what comes to mind first as an engineer, but engineering is team focused. You are working with other people to solve problems, and you need to be able to communicate what's going on and do that in a way that is good, for lack of a better way of saying it. But culture, so family dinner, some things that we do to really encourage, you know, focus outside of just coding and just working on projects. So family dinner is something that we do every Monday night in all of our programs, or in Saturday in our part-time remote program. It's called Saturday Snacks and Shoutouts. For a lot of folks, it's not dinner, so, you know, no pressure there. That's a time when we all get together and eat or, you know, communicate. We do shout outs every week as well, where basically if someone else has helped you get through a block, or, you know, sent you a coffee when you were having a bad day, or just checked in with you over Slack, or really anything, you're able to kind of announce that to the community and say like, thank you for this, you went above and beyond in this area, and just encourages like speaking up for others, like noticing the things that help get you through. And really just like, I feel like if I had to pick out something from Codesmith culture that like really is representative, that is what I would choose. Like the type of like celebrating others, like celebrating problem solving, celebrating like help, I think just really showcases that. We also do a lot of team building activities, you know, relay races and scavenger hunts. Those have actually been adapted quite well to the remote environment, I would say. There's lots of fun things people have created on our team that are like relay race focused, or like web scavenger hunts. Game nights as well. We've been big on code names. Has anyone played code names? It's quite fun. It's also a board game, so if you want to buy that for your family, I would recommend. It's kind of strategy, teamwork focused. These are pictures that are not from a remote environment, as you can probably imagine. So we are doing less of this stuff right now. In LA, we used to play kickball a lot. I love kickball. So that was one of my favorite activities that we did. That was at like long lunches. We have some of our team members who've been yoga instructors in the past. So like we'll lead a yoga time. Mindfulness is big here. So meditation, times to cue in for things like that. So stress relieving activities. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It's a stressful program. You'll have bad days. There are times when you are frustrated. That is computer science in general. Bugs are hard. They can be super rewarding, but you have to get to that finish line for them to be there. So there's a lot that we do to kind of focus on this like holistic education approach, and like how can you manage that stress and, you know, time management, and a lot of things come in from that, from like the wellness, mindfulness perspective. Inclusivity and diversity is definitely very important to us as well. So we have multiple scholarships for folks from minorities or just less represented communities in technology. Deferred payment agreements also come into that. So if you don't specifically qualify or are awarded a scholarship, there are deferred payment agreements, which basically means, oops, oh no, that you don't pay interest and you're able to kind of pay that over a specific amount of time. Mentorship program as well. So when you are filling out our application, if you qualify for our mentorship program, there'll be a question that pops up asking if you're interested in being a part of that. And that is prior to joining the program. So that is someone who can work with you and kind of make your specific preparation process. They can be a resource for questions or just kind of like a person to encourage you. So that's definitely a great thing. Implicit bias workshops, we do 2 of these in the program, one at the beginning, just kind of setting you up for the program and kind of like implicit bias that comes into play all the time, but especially in technology and especially in like education. We also do a second one in the senior part of the program that's really focused on hiring, salary negotiations, interviewing techniques, resumes, just because Codesmith is creating leaders in the tech industry. We think that all of our alumni are going on to be hiring managers or involved in hiring decisions later in life, and want to give you the tool set to be able to do so, with the focus on understanding where implicit bias comes in and being able to combat that. First step is knowing it exists and being able to think about it. Second step is making actionable change about that and wanting to prepare all of our graduates to be able to do that in their next role and for the rest of their career. Lunch and learns are things that we do once a month as a team, as well as students are invited, where one of our team members picks a resource on a variety of different topics, such as we listened to a TED Talk about race relations in America. We've listened to stuff on citizenship and immigration. We've listened to things on the women's suffrage movement and the right to vote. And these are kind of a time to get together and learn together as a community, and then talk about this in a more like led discussion way as well. Office hours happen once per your junior portion, the first 6 weeks, or the first, 38 divided by 2, 19 weeks. Is that right? I think so. Oh, quick math. The first half of the program, as well as the second half of the program, where you are paired up with a team member who is basically just to talk about how things are going, to check in, see how your pair programming partners have been going, how you're feeling about the project phase. In the senior one, we talk a lot about like what your ideal specific goals are for your career path. And so we're able to kind of tailor the attention that you get in that portion to know kind of where you're coming in from. And then we have lots of additional events. WISE events, or Women in Software Engineering, is a larger meetup. We just did a really awesome panel a couple weeks ago on women in tech that I think we're going to be putting on our YouTube next week if it's not up there already. So since you missed that, I would definitely check that out if that's of interest to you. We're always putting information on our YouTube as well. So if we have more events and you don't see an email about those, YouTube's a great place to go. And then Algorithm is a time that we have to get together, all kind of about women alumni, women preparing, or women identifying, and focus on like, we've done quite a few of them. So either like, honestly, which one? We've done a lot of algorithm ones. We've done a lot of prep around different types of like whiteboarding techniques, and then more like thinking about it from a career perspective or like narrative perspective. So kind of a wide variety of those. Ladies' lunches, and then alumni events as well. Some pictures there. This is from a relay race, so that's why they're all red or red backgrounds. I think they were team red, if I had to guess. So some logistics, I've hinted at some of these. These are all on our website also, so if you have questions about that, feel free to look back there. But current hours, these are the same, remote as well, total 13 weeks. There's a week without instruction in the middle of the program that kind of splits up that program. That is for project ideation, currently remote, both of those, as well as our part-time remote, so a little bit different hours, structured on weeknights as well as Saturday, longer remote instruction through Zoom. If this is your first time in Zoom today, we are on Zoom right now for this info session. This is very similar to the classroom environment that you have in both of our on-site currently remote programs, as well as our part-time remote program. I'm sure you've all used Zoom. It's probably the most popular, I don't even know, video streaming service now, but that's what we use for all of our events, as well as all of our classroom environment too. So junior portion breakdown, what does that mean to be a junior? So junior means you're in the first half of the program. This is a lot more focused on those modules and units covering the technologies. So most days are broken up in lecture, and then you are paired up with an individual that you're a pair programming partner for in our immersive program for 2 days. And then in our part-time program, roughly like a week and a half. So the timelines are a little bit different. And you work with that person to solve through a challenge set, a skill builder, or like working on a project that is specific to that unit. So lectures are all focused on that. And then you get right into building with it right away. So you can start to play around with it. This is really focused on like project best practices or engineering best practices. These are some of the technologies that we focus on here. React, Redux being core, Node, Docker, AWS, Express, things like that. There also are, well, I'll get to that in a second. So hack hours also happen every day during your program as well. So that is a time that you can imagine. You have an hour, you are solving through an algorithm, and then you have a lecture that is the solution to yesterday's algorithm challenge. These are broken up in terms of themes. There's a lot of strategies that you can employ to solve certain algorithms and basically preparing you for those later on. That's pretty core computer science, as well as a pretty typical process for technical interviews when you're going for that job after the program. And then we do bring some project building into the junior portion. So you have, I believe, 3 projects as well. Solo project, you can imagine what that is, basically working on your own. I really, really recommend that is spent reviewing technologies that you've worked with already within the program versus the time for you to start building your startup. The amount of people that I've seen like scope just way out the window. So think about like preparing yourself to kind of go into the next project phase, really like focusing on a technology that maybe you don't feel super comfortable with and then working that on your own. And then scratch and iteration project come up. I'm sure this is actually later. Yep. Getting ahead of myself. So I'm going to save that for the next slide, which is 2 slides ahead of me, which I'll get to. Then I'm going to go to the next one, actually. So senior portion. So there still are lectures that come into the senior portion. Here's a list of some of those. These are a little bit more advanced, I would say, and a little bit less focused on units and more focused on just the practices taught in them. So DevOps, Advanced Git, UX UI, System Design, Machine Learning. We just redid our UX UI unit recently. It's really good. Would recommend that one for sure. That's also just a lot to know. System design also comes in more from a hiring perspective, since system design questions are pretty popular for technical interview processes as well. This is also pretty much all project building. So in that middle week in between the senior and the junior portion, you are doing ideation for that production project, which I'll talk about in a little bit. And then the first 4 weeks in the immersive program for the full-time one is spent on this one project with a project group that you basically have a selection choice over, or get to kind of say what your preferences are. Then you go into our reinforcement project, which is right after that, where you are basically working with technologies that you didn't work on in your production project. Then in the production project, you're going super deep. So like maybe your specific role on that project is only node focused. And so by the time that you're about to graduate, it could have been 6 weeks since you've worked in React. And so we want to kind of get you back reintroduced to some of those other technologies that you learned in the junior portion. We also kind of that later in there, so hiring practices start in week 8. So hiring lectures, salary negotiation, starting to work on technical interview prep, mock interview prep, things like that. And you also do tech talks, which is basically a 15-minute presentation on something that you give as a senior. Everyone gives on something that isn't covered in the core curriculum. So say like bias in algorithms, or say like machine learning trends, or AI is always a popular one, or TypeScript, or Postgres, or Postman. So kind of like taking something and going a little bit deeper on that and giving a presentation to all of your other cohort mates as well as the juniors. So in your time at Codesmith, you see a tech talk almost every day. Either you're seeing it as a junior for your seniors, and then as a senior from your cohort mates, or you're giving it yourself. So those are super fun. I think there's some examples on our YouTube as well if you're interested in those. Hiring program, like I talked about, so that comes in stuff like mock interviews. Just really, I think I actually have a slide on that, so I'm going to save it. I'm going to get there. So projects, I already talked about the solo project, scratch and iteration project, also in the junior portion. So 2 different projects there, both team focused, kind of going the next step after that solo project where you're working on something with a group. And then after you're done with the scratch project, you then give that project to another team and they iterate on it and add to that. So it's really good at getting you experience with getting like another person's code base. It teaches you to write comments if you have not been doing that well enough already. I cannot even talk about how many people are like, wow, this is really showing me like how much more clear I need to be with like what we're doing with each of these like PRs or each of these lines or each of these files. Truly get that example when you're given kind of a base that's not yours. And also just working at agile methodology. So Scrum, getting used to that, daily stand-ups, getting used to having a project management tool, things like that. Production project, definitely this is the main bread and butter of the project experience at Codesmith. In the full-time program, it's about 4 weeks. I think this is really what sets people apart to that mid to senior level role. You are just becoming such a credible source on these technologies you're working with. And these are things that aren't like, I'm going to hook up the Google Maps API with the Yelp API and like populate Yelp here. It's more like I'm going to build like a testing infrastructure for enzyme that doesn't exist so people can do enzyme tests faster. It's like you're really working with the tools and like solving challenges that developers are facing. And really it's focused on the open source community. And so you're basically giving back to that community. We have a lot of projects that are iterated on many times through different Codesmith students. We have client projects. So we've worked with a lot of outside partners that have come in and basically been like, we work with some of your students to build out this application or to work on this. So that's pretty popular as well. And then that reinforcement project I talked about as well. So kind of coming back in and working on a different technology set that you hadn't been in your production project. I would definitely recommend asking our 2 fellows that come in later about their production projects and what they ended up doing. I think their examples will be better than kind of the general overview I just gave to kind of give you an idea about the caliber and what those projects end up looking like. Oh, amazing. Career services. So practice and mock interviews. These are crucial. Interviewing as a skill set, you have to practice it. No one just comes in being like the most exceptional interviewer in the world. Like that just is a skill set that you have to refine. So we do that a ton at Codesmith, both from like I'm talking about my background and from a narrative perspective, as well as like I'm solving an algorithm or a system design question from a whiteboarding perspective or a thought process perspective. Networking days. So these are days that are actually only for LA and New York program, so not for our part-time remote program, where we have basically talking to grads at our company or connections that we have at different companies, kind of doing like a networking session that is like kind of focused on referrals and kind of making those connections at companies that you'd want to work on. Online profile and resume are crucial as well. A lot of folks are coming from very different industries and are like, I've never had a technical or resume, or like, I don't know what my LinkedIn should look like now that like I'm working with React and Node. Like I don't have any recommendations on that before. And so really talking about like what that looks like from a presence of like a more technical software engineering focused skill set. And like I said, post-grad support, it does not end when you graduate. In fact, like that's where it really ramps up. You have check-ins every 2 weeks with our hiring support team. There's a dedicated hiring support fellow you can do mock interviews with or reach out about conversion rates. Annie's in charge of that. She is just fantastic. And that also goes to negotiating job offer packages. So when you have that final contract, or, you're looking at options or shares and you want some secondary advice, we are there for that as well. And this also does not stop at your first job. So we've had tons of people come back for second jobs or third jobs, even fourth jobs at this point. And so that kind of continues to go from there. I also would say that a lot of that post-grad support comes from your alumni community too. It's like almost every other day when like someone's sharing a job opportunity at either their company or something that a recruiter reached out to them for that they're not interested in. And so kind of like that connection just like goes from beyond there too. People asking if you've interviewed here, or, this is the wording that's coming from my technical assessment. Has anyone seen something like this and has recommendations for how I should prepare, even if it's not the same company, things like that. Outcomes overview. So outcomes stats. So we are basically part of an organization called CIRR. If you are interested in that, I'd recommend looking them up. They're a separate organization that basically has a standardized process for outcomes reporting. So we actually get third-party audited as well through a secondary audit firm that then we have, when that's audited, then we submit to CIRR. All CIRR data has to be represented in a very standardized way so that you're able to look between programs and compare. So, how many people got jobs in the last 180 days? What was the average salary? They really focus on median as well, but we have different outcomes reports for our LA program as well as our New York program, so they separate those out. So kind of where our graduates are now, I think higher than 180 days is impressive. We have very few people also going to freelance or like short-term contracts. Those are primarily for our full-time roles. It actually separates that out in the reporting as well. And then 120K median starting salary combined between LA and New York for the first half of 2019. We are just finishing up with the first half of 2020, so these will be updated soon. The second half of 2019 19, because basically they have to have 6 months to do the job search before they are able to be reported about for CIR, and then it goes to the audit process. So definitely take a look at that. We are also redoing our graduate outcomes and hiring support page to kind of make this more clear from a graph perspective. And we have a really awesome blog that kind of overviews like how to look at outcomes reports and kind of special highlights there. So if you haven't checked out our blog yet, I recommend taking a look there because it'll walk you through all those too. Admissions. So we have not talked about that yet. Amazing. So like I mentioned earlier, we are looking for more than just JavaScript knowledge. You can actually see that that's number 5 on this list of like what we are looking for. Problem solving is huge. So how are you solving this problem? Like basically like what are the steps you're looking for? Like, are you good at, I mean, Googling is such a skill set for, I'm sure anyone here who's come with a problem, like what's your first resource? Googling like, well, I think is like one of the ultimate skill sets of a developer. So technical communication comes in as that too. Like that's kind of what I talked about earlier about like, this is like a team-based thing. I think a lot of people still have that kind of idea of like, oh, an engineer is like someone sitting in their basement with like the glare of the computer screen in their like dark room, like alone. Like that is not the case. You are working with other people all the time. You have to be able to talk about what's going on, like especially with your code, especially with your product managers or UX designers or your team leads. And so we really focus on technical communication right from the start, which means in our technical interview, you should be talking the whole time. You should be telling us what you're doing, why you're doing this, because our interviewer cannot tell why you're doing something. If you are adding in a console log to check something, let us know why. So then if that like comes up with a bug or like we are like, oh, you know, they're close, that's the right idea. They're just, the syntax is wrong. That to us looks way better than like, oh, they're just like checking and guessing or like Googling random things or something like that. So technical communication is huge. Best way to do that is pair programming or talking to yourself out loud while you are solving problems. Also is good is recording yourself, which is so awkward for sure, but it does really like show you like what you're explaining if you're able to go back and watch that and be like, oh, that was confusing. Another tip I have is if you're recording yourself, try to incorporate your solution from your recording. So like based on the steps that you're following, try to then re-listen back to your recording and implement that solution. If you're missing a step or you're not clear what you were going to do or why you were doing that, that should show you that you should be talking more about through the step-by-step process. Engineering approach. So like I mentioned, like how you handle not knowing, like if you hit a block, are you like throwing your computer in the air? Like that's not great. So we're looking for that, methodical approach, like excited about the challenge of solving bugs. One of the reasons I'm not an engineer is because I hate debugging, but if you're here, that means you probably don't. So that's amazing. So patience, reference to documentation, all of that. Non-technical communication, I brought that up a little bit too. So like, are you here to be supportive? Are you here to build others up? Are you here to be a team player? Especially for remote applicants, because, well, right now we're all spending a lot of time on Zoom, but like just being focused on others' knowledge and like growth, I think is more difficult over the internet, to be honest. And so I think that that becomes especially into play during that. And then JavaScript knowledge, that is crucial too. We do test for things like higher order functions, closures, recursion comes in there a tiny bit, not that often, but that is kind of the basis for what we're looking at in our technical interview. How to prep, process. Okay, online application, pretty self-explanatory. If you're using a fast track code, which I will send out at the end of this meeting, which basically allows you to skip the essays and guarantees you a first round interview for coming to one of our workshops. You're also welcome to not apply with that. If you want to write the essays, awesome, do it. Non-technical interview, so this is really focused on like your background, goals, why you're interested in the program, getting a sense about like you more so and like, kind of who you are and why you're interested in this. Then the technical interview, things that we just touched base on, is about an hour long of you working with one of our engineering fellows and basically going through challenges until the hour is done. There isn't like a number that you have to hit, or there isn't like a certain passing mark. Like we just talked about, there's a lot of different elements that go into what we're looking for versus what we're not looking for. And then decision and financing. So our admissions team will help you out with financing, scholarships, our financial aid, partnerships, payment plans, things like that. How is COVID impacting the on-site program? So we are completely remote. Our programs to the end of 2020 are also completely remote, and most likely for the beginning part of 2021 as well. We have not officially announced that, but it's pretty difficult for programs like ours to go back to onsite, and we are really prioritizing safety of our students. I think we're pretty lucky in the sense that this is tech education. Like, this is basically one of the easiest things to do online. We've been working in Zoom for the last 3.5 years. We've always liked Zoom. And so I think that as things go, that's definitely been something that, you know, it was a transition, of course, to go from onsite to here, but since things have been going, that's not been our biggest issue, I would say, for sure. Like, I think as an industry, we should all feel pretty good about like what tech is able to do remotely, and able to we're able to do everything that we were in person online. Kind of some of the adjustments that we have done, collaboration coding, which means that your pair programming partner will partner with other groups as well. Usually when you're in person, you can kind of like reach over or tap someone, or you're walking by someone. So trying to like facilitate as much of that like per pair interaction as well. Mentor and mentee sessions. So you have those weekly that kind of would take place about, you know, if you were seeing them at lunch or dinner, or, you know, going to get coffee or going on a walk, kind of doing that as well. Thursday night movie nights, that's an example of kind of some of the transitions we've done with Thursday nights. Game nights, we've also mentioned, we've done spa nights a couple times, kind of DIY stuff. And then we meet up a lot more during the day as well. So there's morning stand-ups, lunchtime remarks, and closing remarks every single day. And so these basically get you a time to work and like see your other cohort mates, to interact with our instructors more, to make sure that you're being heard. During the day, always that we have like a help desk channel that if you're stuck or need help or need assistance from one of our fellows, you can always ask. But that was also the case on site as well. Some other things that I want to highlight is, I totally had something I wanted to highlight as well that wasn't on this list. I'll keep thinking about it, but it might come back to me. But these are just some examples of that. We will be sending out email correspondence, like if we ever make a change or decide to go back on site. We're basically just keeping a really close eye on like what is recommended, especially with like the amount of people we have in our space. Financial aid, so total tuition number, scholarship fund, payment plans over part-time remote, the next slide covers that, as well as Climb and Skills Fund are both of our financial aid partnerships as well. So you can have multiple different loan schedules with those, as well as you can, well, I guess you could also borrow for living expenses. I don't know if people are planning on moving to LA and New York. I wouldn't recommend it since you don't need to if you don't live there. But if people did that in the past, they were also able to borrow living expenses for that as well. These are these payment plans that was just mentioned for the part-time remote immersive, since it is over a longer period of time. The admissions team will help you out with all of this about what you would look like for each person individually. So I'm not going to cover this specifically right now, but if you are interested, know that you're able to have communications about that. And there are 3 different options, base payment amount kind of being the biggest difference, which, you know, in turn connects to what you pay each month. Okay, this is the area that I like the most since CSX is basically my child. I work on CSX all the time. It was like one of my first huge projects like 3 years ago, but it's a really awesome place to just work on challenges. There's so many different things that I need to add to CSX that I'm wanting to, but basically like use that as a resource to know what types of challenges we'd ask on our technical interview. It will mark on CSX like commonly asked in the technical interview. So the units that you should focus on are callbacks, closures, and higher order functions. Async and OOP do not come up. Recursion comes up sometimes, and then the pre-units basically before those as well. We just added about 23 new challenges within the last month and a half, mostly to the functions and callbacks units. So if you haven't been on CSX in a while, definitely go back and take a look on that. Also, the Slack channel is awesome. So we have basically a Slack channel. Is anyone on the Slack channel? Yes, a couple people. So recommend getting in that. There is a CSX challenge help channel that's pretty much going off all day about people asking like for advice on how to solve a challenge. It's also a great place if you are a little bit more advanced to become a mentor. If you know or you struggle through that challenge yourself, the best way to learn is by teaching others and really cementing that knowledge. So you can come in there and like give people like recommendations about how you solved it, what that looks like. And, you know, it's just all about community building, like being that support system, like being able to help others out as well. And free JavaScript workshops. So like I mentioned, we have these weekly. Most common nights are Intro to JavaScript is on Wednesday nights, which are more of our beginner workshops. And then JavaScript, the hard parts, is on Thursday night, which are a little bit more advanced, as well as pair programming. And then some things else switch during the week. So just take a look at our events page on our website. Those are going to be the best way to prepare as well, since that's us walking through a lot of the content that's on CSX. You're able to ask questions, you're able to meet other folks, you're able to interact with our instructors, kind of get a sense of their teaching style and communication. That's definitely the best way, I would say, also to kind of get a feel of our culture before coming on site, because that's directly who would be giving your lectures in the program. And so you're able to kind of meet with them, see what their teaching style is as well. Also, most of our instructors have pre-recorded versions on YouTube. So if your timing doesn't work out for work, definitely take a look at that YouTube as well. I'm sure that's coming up next. I hope it's not. Nice. Okay. So we also have prep programs. JavaScript for Beginners is our kind of like first program that we offer for folks that are just starting out with their coding journey. So that, while I also say that it's for folks just starting out, I do recommend taking a look at our pre-course part 1 on CSX prior to starting, just because you'll be able to kind of get a sense of syntax. I feel like when you're just starting to learn JavaScript, the thing that comes up more often than the concepts are just like, I don't know how I would write this. And so just taking a look at like what syntax would look at like first before starting. Not required, but I just recommend it personally, just because I think that taking a look at things first helps you start to like digest the information more so when you're in that classroom experience. 2 consecutive Saturdays, excuse me. This has always been online, so these are going to continue to be online as well. And then the tuition that you pay for this program rolls over to CS Prep and then rolls over to the Immersive as well. So if you are planning on going down that path, there's no reason not to do that if this is where you're starting out experience-wise. CS Prep, so this program, like you would maybe guess from its name, is designed to prep you for the program, the technical interview, our teaching style. It's a little bit more advanced in JavaScript for Beginners, definitely not for someone who has never coded. So take a look at CSX, come to our workshops, start working on beginner JavaScript. I would say if you know functions, then you're ready for CS Prep. So that's kind of a good base letter. You also will talk to someone in CS Prep on a phone screen, and you can always say like, hey, this is where I'm at. Do you think this is good for starting CS Prep, or should I prep a little bit more for CS Prep? They'll be able to help you out with that. So same consecutive Saturdays, but also Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. There is a project as part of CS Prep as well. Course cost is $750 with scholarships available. Same with JavaScript for Beginners, had scholarships available. And then tuition also rolls over to the full-time program. Questions? Oh, the one thing that I did not mention. Oh, I skipped this also. Where am I? JavaScript for Beginners. We are also doing a COVID fund right now, which means that we are offering 100% scholarships to those that are impacted by COVID. What the process is like for that is after you apply to JavaScript for Beginners, there'll be a type form information to kind of specify specific impacts that COVID has had on you. And then that would be awarded separately. So you will get like that tuition invoice right away, but just wait for our admissions team to reach back out to you and you can let us know that you've applied to that. I should have added that to this slide, but know that that is currently going on. Definitely will be for the rest of 2020, and I highly think it's going to be continued into the beginning of 2021 as well. These are important dates. I somehow skipped this slide. So upcoming cohorts, JSB, October 10th, CS Prep, October 12th, LA, November 16th, New York, December 7th, and then part-time remote, November 28th. I will send those fast track codes in the Zoom chat right after this as well. I will include them in an email tomorrow. And like I mentioned, those allow you to apply to our programs by skipping the application essays and guaranteeing the first round interview. Now my question. So I'm going to stop my screen share so if I can see folks that are in the chat. And I think that there looks like there's been some chats beforehand. So oh, Craig, you dislike spiders. Oh, you don't dislike them. Okay. I got worried. Okay. Are networking days still happening amidst COVID? Great question. Yes, they are. They are just remotely as well. We are doing phone screens. I have some questions, but afraid there might not be enough time for me to ask them. Prince, are you still here? I see you still here. So I think that we qualify the fast track. Is that right? Yes, you do. I will send it in the Slack. I'm going to copy that right now before I forget. I will also email these out tomorrow, so do not fear if you do not get this. I'm just going to send this here before. And those codes basically that I just sent, those would be added onto the bottom question on the first page of the application for the cohort. What languages do the technical interviews come in? It is only JavaScript. So that's pretty much that. It's only JavaScript. Just learned about the Black Engineer Scholarship. Yes, I did not mention that. That is a full scholarship, so up to 100% of tuition. And if you do not receive the full scholarship, there are specific deferred payment plans that come as part of that as well. What's the maximum number of people who are awarded the scholarship? What qualities are you looking for potential winners of the scholarship? Great question. We do not have a maximum person list right now. I believe that we are going to be doing 10 in 2020, but I think that there's plenty left. I do not work in admissions, so I don't have as close of an eye on the number that we have awarded so far, but I would definitely reach out to our admission team about that. And qualities we're looking for, kind of similar to all of our scholarships, but really focused on like building community, sharing knowledge with others, like building others up, past examples of times that you've gone above and beyond to help others, and just passion in software engineering in general. Excitement about the tech industry, excitement about computer science, excitement about sharing that knowledge. But there is a specific application for that that kind of gets at a lot of those questions. And so you'll be able to answer those in essay format about what your responses would be. So we're able to get that holistic view because those questions are separate from our regular application. Great question. How do the family dinners play out during COVID? Yes. So Zoom, we do it over Zoom. Zoom also has something called breakout rooms where we're able to like randomize folks going into like different rooms, which basically allows you to communicate with more like groups of like 6 to 8 people versus like 60. Because I'm sure if anyone's been in like a big group Zoom, it's a little bit awkward to try to talk since there could be like 15 other people talking at once. It's hard to tell. So we do breakout rooms, which are kind of like, I guess, be similar to like your specific table that you'd be sitting at if we were in person. Part-time remote, what days and times the classes take place? They take place Monday through Thursday, I believe from 5 to 8 p.m. Pacific time, as well as Saturday. I always get this wrong, but it's either 9 to 3 or 9:30 to 3:30 Pacific time. But I can send that out in tomorrow's email, as well as it's on our website on that page too. How large is a typical cohort for the full-time program? Typically around 28 to 35 students, I would say. So we don't like to go over 36. And so we try to keep it below 35-ish, around that area. I would say most end up being roughly around like 30, 32. You are welcome to eat real food. I like that question. I've not gotten that before. Please do eat real food since it's probably dinner for you. Is the full-time remote available in the summer? Yes. So our full-time remote, so kind of the typical cadence is we have a full-time remote program starting every 7 weeks per location. So a lot of the differences we see right now are every 7 weeks for Pacific time and New York time on those cycles. And for our part-time remote, those are going to start to be done every 3 months, I believe. So we just started one a couple weeks ago, and the next one starts in November. And so that's going to actually be triple overlapped soon. Well, there are 3 cohorts going at once. Rough percentage of those accepted to immersives versus those that apply. Rough percentage. I always like getting that lead in, and then I always get stressed about if it's rough enough, how close. I would say it's a little bit different because we do offer multiple technical interviews. So if you do not pass on your first technical interview, we kind of give you personalized feedback to come back and reapply to, like, basically, if you didn't do well in this area, come back and do that. So first percentage of those accepted right away, I would say is pretty low. The majority of people are accepted on that second or third round interview. I don't really have an idea about like those that come in and apply and how many end up doing the program though, or how many end up being accepted. But I would say if you are following our feedback carefully, which we give really personalized feedback, so you should know exactly what to work on, you do have a good chance of being admitted. It just might take you a lot longer, which is fine. We've had people that have prepared for like a year and a half. Everyone also is preparing on different levels. So, if you're working, 10 hours a week, that's a lot different than someone who's working 30 hours a week. So your prep timeline is going to be different. With other boot camps, once you pass the technical interview, they still require pre-course work that must be completed before starting. Great question. We do have pre-course work that is required for starting. We try to have people that are accepted at least like 3 weeks before the cohort starts. You're able to do that. It's all kind of done on your own, though we do have pre-course office hours each week where you can come in and ask questions about that. And once you are accepted, you're added to your cohort Slack channel. So lots of communications happening between people on like setting up a time to work on it over Zoom or asking questions about parts of that. But great question. We do have pre-course work that comes in as well. A lot of that's actually in HTML and CSS, since we don't focus on HTML and CSS too much at the beginning of the program. And so want you to see that before you come in. That's also just a tip. If you do have extra time, I always recommend working in HTML and CSS in addition to JavaScript too, since it's just a lot of experience with those. And like the more you work in it, the more you know its quirks and syntax and things like that, and are able to kind of hit the ground running once the program starts. No problem. Happy to answer questions. If you had to drop out of the program, could you retake the next cohort? Yeah, so we do have like specific cases for like how long you've been in it and what the deferral process looks like. But that's definitely happened before for, family emergencies or things that go on where you maybe need to take a step back and then come back in later. So deferring a cohort is totally possible. Great question. I'm going to ask our fellows to come in soon. Unless anyone has other questions for me, feel free to save them for our fellows also, since they have more personalized experience in the program to talk about. But I can always talk about it from a logistic or a company perspective too. And I'm also going to be here when they're answering questions. So if the question's more likely able to be answered by me, I can do that too. I'm just looking for them on Slack. Where are they? Stephanie and Cherie are going to be helping us out tonight. They are both LA fellows. Cherie is a senior fellow, which means we are ready. She has been in the fellowship for probably about 9 weeks now, and Stephanie is a junior fellow, so she's more recent graduate as well. Coming in, yay, welcome. So they should be joining us in a second. I'm gonna send my email again, just so everyone has that. And then on CSX Slack.
Hey, Haley.
Hi. I can't see you. Oh, I see you. Awesome.
Hey,
perfect. Stephanie, we are ready when you are. I'm a little earlier than I thought.
Here.
She's here? Oh, perfect. Cool.
Nice.
Okay. Okay, so we've been doing lots of questions, but Cherie, do you mind going first and kind of just giving a little overview of your background? And then do you mind also mentioning your production project? I feel like that would be helpful as well. And then Stephanie, do an intro after.
Cool. So I'm Cherie. I was working in tech on the business side. I was an econ major, and I was pretty much wearing like every business hat for a while. And I realized I was getting better at everything except asking the dev team to fix my stuff. Like I could never guess if it was like a 30-minute thing or a 1-month thing, and that just like really bothered me. So I was like, you know what, why don't I place myself further in like the problem solving funnel and gain a perspective on that. So decided to start coding. It took me a few months, got into Codesmith, really liked it, really fell in love with the front end. So for my production project, I built something like single page applications are really popular now. So my production project, if you were using a certain tech stack that helped you build a single page application, it would basically show you like the tree of like the components that were like included in that single page application, and also like what parts were getting updated. So it was really fun, and I think that's it. Yeah, and now I'm a fellow.
Me next. I'm Stephanie. I guess I have a similar background to Cherie. I was in the advertising technology space primarily, and focused on business development partnerships. So working with like vendor accounts that all the like, if you've ever looked at the cookies in your browser and see how many things are tracking you, like that's the type of companies I worked with. You're collecting all of your data. And I just realized that I wasn't thriving or I didn't feel that it was really using my best skills in that role. I just feel like other people are more, I don't know, not necessarily extroverted, but more into that like negotiating, selling, like kind of thing. And I always was more excited when I got opportunities to work on the tech stuff, like writing SQL queries to pull data or trying to investigate, we call them bid requests that send data back and forth about the user or that person that has an ad opportunity. And I just was most interested in that kind of thing and could get lost in it for hours. So eventually gave in and started doing hard parts and that kind of thing. And yeah, did the immersive, and now I'm a fellow. So I don't know, same thing.
Thanks both. So if anyone has questions, feel free to throw them into the chat or unmute yourself and say it out loud if you're feeling adventurous. Either way is good. There's no way, there's no questions.
Is this only questions about coding, or can we ask about golden orb spiders also?
I think let's stick for the coding today, but I'm happy to chat over email Craig about my spiders. Cool.
Oh, I had a question as well. So I'm about to complete my bachelor's in computer science and information security in the spring of 2021, and I'm currently on internship at DTCC as a Salesforce administrator, and you know, work and school at the same time. And then I was probably gonna hold this program off until after I graduate, or do you think it's possible that I could do it at the same time?
Ooh, I would say if you wanted to get the most out of your program to like, because you don't want to be worried, like the only thing you really want to be worried about are like coding problems, not just like, hey, I know I'm capable of doing this, but it's just that I don't have time. So I think personally, if I were given that choice and having done the program, I would probably like want nothing in my life except for this program, because one, it takes up a lot of your time, and two, like it is one of those experiences where it's what you put into, you know, at the end of the day, it's, you know, I don't know. It's my answer.
Okay, thank you for the answer. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Hi there, can you hear me?
Oh, I would say there's actually a student right now who is in his summer for college. And I think he was going to try to like finish the last few weeks overlapping with school. And he ended up, I think, postponing like the semester because he just realized that there was not really a way to do it or that it would be a lot to try to do it. So that's just a real life example, I think.
Oh, I see a question in the chat. It says, how long do you think I will need without any coding experience for the upcoming cohort if I can focus this on alone? I think that's very subjective. I feel like I've heard people only take a month. I needed 3 months. I've heard people take longer. I feel like for me, and whenever someone asks me if they're ready for Codesmith, my thing is like, are you comfortable with code? Like, do you feel very comfortable with code? Or are there parts like, are you using methods in your solutions that you're not like looking up or fully understanding what's going on? I think CSX is a great pulse check for that. So I can't really tell you that, but I feel like I could give you a range. You know, I've heard 1 month, and I've heard 3 months, and I've heard longer. I've also heard much shorter. So maybe pulse check with yourself to see, you know, do you think you're ready? I don't know.
Oh, I think a message was sent to me on accident privately. How many hours outside of the lectures have you spent on coursework? So since it's kind of an immersive program, most of the day is outside of lectures. So maybe just talking about like the lecture breakdown with modules.
You want to take this one first?
Sure. I tried to follow the Like, only do what you can, and it's a marathon, not a sprint. So don't try to do too much outside of the allotted hours, because the allotted hours are 9 a.m. to 8 p.m. Like, that's a long day. And every minute of that day is accounted for. So it's a lot, and trying to do extra is hard. I think a lot of students do, and you know your own limits. But I would say like a couple days a week, I probably worked another hour or two in the evening, and then sometimes on Sunday for a couple hours, like catching up on stuff. But I would say I maybe was one of the lesser aggressive studiers outside of class. Yeah, I think I could have gotten more out of it if I'd done more, of course, but I also needed to keep my own like personal time in check.
Yeah, agreed. It's a marathon. You're coding 6 days a week, every week for 13 days straight. I'm gonna stress like these pulse checks because, oops, sorry. If I wanted to stay up late, I would, but if I didn't want to, I didn't. You know, like if I had that natural curiosity of like, you know, do I want to figure this out to work? I would just cave into that because it's already there. But if like, you know, if it's Saturday and I've already been coding all day and I'm super tired, then I'm just gonna go to sleep and watch a movie or do whatever I want because like, you know, so the only way you're gonna get through this is also like self-care, right? Like you should never push yourself to a point where coding is not fun. You know? Cool. Any other questions?
I was just wondering, so were you guys software engineers as well, Sherry and Stephanie?
Nah, I was doing like, I've done sales, support, marketing, pretty much anything you could squeeze an econ degree into. No tech. I did like light SQL queries, but nothing to the level of like what I actually learned inside the program.
Same. I had zero engineering tech background. I had exposure to it, but very basic level.
Oh, wow, I see. Yeah, I was just gonna ask, what does your day-to-day look like?
As a fellow or as a resident?
As a fellow.
Oh, it's kind of random because like the fellow schedule goes, we're kind of in the program twice at the same time because there's always a juniors cohort and there's always a senior cohort and we exist for both of them. So I think our day-to-day is like whatever the current juniors and seniors are currently working on. So junior curriculum is, you know, lectures and learning new tech stacks for the first 6 weeks. And the senior portion is projects. So we're kind of alternating between the two, like helping students with both, which is kind of cool because I'm practicing like switching my mind through multiple projects at once. And a fellow is, well, Haley, I think you could explain that one better than me. I don't want to butcher it.
No. Fellows are basically, I like to compare them to like college class TAs, but like on steroids, which basically means that it's like a full-time position after you graduate the program for another 3 months where you help out with like grading assessments or helping project groups or mentorship or doing technical interviews. So if y'all are interviewing eventually for Codesmith, Sherry or Stephanie could be the one who's leading that, as well as like recommending things there. They also work on engineering projects with me. So kind of working on the Codesmith code base, our website, our CSX, our online learning platform, or internal tools or things like that. So it's both a position to kind of like help students or help potential students screening those, as well as working on kind of like the company side of, you know, just engineering projects or projects in general, working on curriculum updates, working on pre-course updates, kind of all across the board. They're probably like the most important position ever at Codesmith. And it's kind of a temporary contract role where it's about 3 months after the program. You have to apply to it and be selected. Sheree and Stephanie are amazing, which is why they're accepted into it. And now here they are. So I guess that's a fellow. And then a resident is a current student. So kind of like a student, I guess, basically. And then a graduate is like after the program, when you've completed it, you become a graduate. You can either be a graduate and continue on that track and looking for a job, or you can be a fellow and kind of push that back by 3 months.
Cool. I think there's another question in the chat. I think you have more experience with alumni. I don't know if you've heard of by Craig. Do you see that question, Haley?
Yes. We do have international folks, and especially now with our part-time remote program that just started its beta in February, that's a lot more international. So I think that there's actually there's at least 4 different countries represented in just the beta class alone. So that's a little bit more international focused from just a pure student perspective already versus even where people are going. I cannot think of anyone specifically doing like that necessarily. There are a lot of people that go remote and kind of move around the world. One of my friends from a past cohort, Eric, lived in Peru for a long time. He was there to surf, but then, was excited about his job was remote. So there's it depends on the person. I think remote work obviously is becoming a lot more popular now too. So if you are going into software engineering to become remote, there are definitely opportunities for that, that even existed prior to the current, focus on remote work. But I cannot think of someone specifically besides Eric. I don't even know if, third world countries, I'm not sure. All right, back to you, Sri and Stephanie.
I can Google it too. I just wondered if there was a personal connection. So, thank you.
Yeah.
Well, any regrets? No regrets at all. Wouldn't do anything differently. Just trust the process, yeah, that's it. And I've asked other residents this, because I was I didn't want to be telling everybody I had no regrets, and then there was a huge population with regrets, but no one has any regrets. I would say just do pulse checks. I don't know, Stephanie, do you have regrets? Do you want to confess them?
Yeah, I mean, it's just my personality. I've always struggled with being comfortable acknowledging my weaknesses and asking questions, because I of course think my questions are stupid, which usually someone else ends up asking the same question. So I think I personally just would have been more assertive or aggressive, or stepped out of my comfort zone a little bit more to acknowledge those points where I needed assistance. I like working through things on my own too, but sometimes that can be a waste of time, where it would have been easier to just ask for a little bit of help and get a push in the right direction. But that's the only thing I think, which is a personal thing, not anything about the program. So there's always people available to ask. You just have to be willing to ask.
That's actually a really good one. I feel like Codesmith provides a lot of academic resources. I don't know how to label them, but the biggest struggle for me before I got into Codesmith was finding someone to talk code with, at any time. And when you're in the program, it's from 9 a.m. to 8 p.m. with people coding late and on weekends really frequently. So anytime you have a hurdle, there's 60 people online at any time to be hey, I need help, and they're happily there. I feel that was the greatest thing for me, because so often when I was alone, I was I know this is easy. I'm lurking through Stack Overflows. I'm posting messages to strangers, praying that a message will be responded to in 2 days, versus Codesmith is okay, right now. Okay, next, what do you think about the idea of going to college? Well, I went to college. I feel it's just anything in life. If you want to do it, do it. If you don't, then don't do it. If it provides a value, pursue it. I don't know. Do you have I don't know if anyone else has the answer. I don't regret going to college or getting my econ degree.
I think that's so personal, but my partner is an attorney, that he has 3 degrees, and he looks at this and goes, what you're doing, and I have an MBA, I have degrees as well, but he's what you're doing now is so amazing for the return on investment of just the amount of time and the relatively small amount of money, considering the cost of 4 years at a university. And you can leave this program and in a reasonable amount of time get a very good job. So if it's a money thing, I would say this is a very good alternative to that. If it's a time issue, but obviously there's still a value in education as well. So I think that's a very personal thing. But if I needed to do something in a hurry and didn't have a lot of money, I think that this type of thing in general is a very good opportunity at the moment with a lot of flexibility in jobs and stuff like that. So if you're weighing one or the other, I think it's just super different. But
True.
I don't know. We have a few people who finished recently from my class who did not go to college, and I think they're about 20 years old, and they're currently looking for jobs. So I can't speak to their outcomes yet. It's only been a month since they finished. But I mean, I think they're on the path to a pretty good alternative. So TBD.
Any other last questions? Like I mentioned, to send my email. I'll send it again, actually. Actually, I think it's right there. So if they come up later today or tomorrow, feel free to email me or Slack me. Final call, I think, on questions. Okay, awesome. Oh, awesome, helpful, cool. Thanks so much, Sheree and Stephanie. Feel free to DM me, like I said, or email me. Everyone have a good rest of your evening. Thanks for tuning in.